All right, let's go ahead and get started. So today you are going to be the ones responsible for graphing the functions of a quadratic. Once again, a quadratic function is a graph that has a parabola where it either opens upward or downwards. Okay? The equation that we're looking at today is going to be the quadratic base equation, y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay? Each of these letters actually represents something. A is going to be what you're looking for as far as how quickly the graph grows. The bigger A is, the more steep the graph is. Like, for example, a bigger A would make this graph a little more narrow, a little bit steeper. If it gets even smaller, it would be a lot flatter like this. Okay? Not to mention that, but this also is going to include which direction the graph opens. Negatives make the graph open downwards, like the one that's still on the screen. A positive A is going to make the graph open upwards like this. If you were to try to go into Desmos, which you absolutely can do if you'd like to mess around with these for a little bit, we can show you what this looks like. Give me just a second to open up my camera, and I'll show you what I mean. So I went into Desmos graphing right here, okay? You can see on this left side where I have negative 2x squared. If I take that negative 2 and switch it to a positive, you're going to see how that graph flips, literally just by making it negative. Now, if I delete that 2, it's going to go wider. I can make it go even wider by getting smaller than 2, by going with like 0.5 or even 0.9, all right? It gets a little bit wider, a little bit narrower. If I go 0.1, oof, wrong button. If I go 0.1, it goes really wide, okay? C is going to move this up or down. C is going to be the thing that has no x afterwards. So if I add a number like, let's do 3 to it, you'll see how the graph moves up. Instead of doing a plus 3, if I minus 3 on there instead, then you're going to see to where it goes below the line. B is the one that's a little bit crazy. B is the one that goes in front of the x. Notice how here it is on the axis where the minimum is. If I just add an x, a 1x, it is going to shift a little bit. Ooh, I did that wrong. Plus x. There we go. It shifted it. What about if instead of a plus x, I did a minus x? It shifted it the other direction. I can decide how many places I move it by making it switch from 5 to, you get the idea. It does move it. B and C work together to describe the side-to-side and up and down motion on it. B generally handles the side-to-side motion on it, while C generally handles the up and down. But they do work together when it comes to that. I will show you how to solve for B and C a little bit more as we continue on with this. It works really well with the quadratic function and such like that. The quadratic equation, it really is something that you have to see and work with, and it is going to take like 2 weeks for us to get to the quadratic, 3 weeks to get to the quadratic function. It is very in depth. Okay. When you graph the quadratic equations that you're given today, you're going to use your calculator to do so, and it's going to generate a table of values. This is going to be something that would allow you to graph it on a graph, which I actually do today. Your goal is to take equations and to be able to graph them and be able to still find the vertex, the maximum, the minimum, the axis of symmetry, the zeros, the y-intercepts, and such like that. So what we are going to do is we're going to take our calculators and we're going to type in the equation that we see on top here, the y equals 3x squared, okay? So let's go ahead and grab our calculators and let's get that done. Let me show you how that looks. Camera again. So once again, I go home and I press B to graph. That gets me here. If you've got stuff on here, you can absolutely delete it. Again, I like clicking on the graph and pressing delete. It'll get rid of it. You can also menu 7 because of table and 2 to remove the table if you'd like. Menu 3, 1 gives you the equation generator, And on this one, it is literally just y equals 3x raised to the 2. You hit enter, and it graphs it for you. Yay, I've got an equation. Menu, 7 for table, 1 to be able to see it. And we can see our x values and our y values. If you look at your paper, the first x value that you get is a -3. It's 27. So we're going to go over here to our charts, and we are going to put in the number 27. I am not going to show the calculator a little bit from here. I'm just going to go ahead and fill these in as we go. So 27 goes in. For -2, it is 12. For -1, it is 3. And then after that, it is 0. Oof. And then you've got 1 being 3, and then you've got 2 being 12. You'll notice these numbers kind of repeat. If you look really carefully, you can see how 3 and 3, and then 12 and 12. That's where the axis of symmetry that we were talking about really comes in, because it shows at what point the equation stops moving down or up the graph and starts moving up instead. So in this case, based on our graph, we have 0, 0, 1, 3, 2 goes all the way up to 12, so it's way up here. And I got another one over here, and another 12 like way over here. So this is going to be what our parabola looks like. Based on that, we can answer the question about where the vertex is. All right, the vertex is again a coordinate, so we want to put it in parentheses. In this case, it is 0, 0, okay? 0, 0 is going to be our vertex. In this case, this is going to be a minimum because this is the lowest point on the graph. It never stops moving up the graph. The axis of symmetry is, again, the line that we're talking about that we can split this graph in half, and that is going to be where x equals 0, because if we drew a line that went straight up through 0, it would split it exactly in half. The zeros here, there's only one of them. Don't forget the zeros are where it crosses the x-axis. And so in this case, that is going to be at 0, 0. That's not always going to be the case. Then the last thing we're going to talk about is our y-intercept. In this case, our y-intercept is in fact 0. All right, so our y-intercept is going to be the point 0, 0. It doesn't go any different than that on this specific graph. This graph, you'll notice, only has really an A on it. It doesn't have a B or a C, and that's part of the reason why it's got a bunch of 0, 0s. That is something that would be the case every time. From here, let's go ahead and go to the next equation. Y equals -x squared minus 2x plus 3. So if we go back to our calculator, once again, we can menu 2 because of table, 1 to remove the table. And again, we can click on this blue graph right here by putting the mouse over it, clicking on it, and pressing delete. Menu 3, 1. Just type in the equation as is. A negative x squared gets subtracted with 2x, and also we get plus 3. Enter. Yay, I've got a graph. Notice that it opens downwards. Menu 7 because of table 1 to show the table. And again, we can fill this in starting from -3 and keep on going. All right, so -3, -2, -1, 0, 3, 4, you get the idea. I come back over here and I start filling in these blanks, which you should be as well. 0, 3, 4, and if I keep going down by moving it with those arrows, you'll see that it goes back to 3, 0, and at 2, we get to -5. Okay, so you'll see how we kind of came to a top point here. Okay, our goal is to be able to go to -1, 4, graph it, from -2, 3, graph it, and then I have -3, 0, and then 1, 0, and you get the idea. So from there, we are able to graph the parabola. It looks about like that. And again, we can start talking about our vertex and such like that. Our vertex here, the highest point that we get to, or lowest point that we get to, the point where it stops going up and starts going down, is at -1 and 4. From there, we can start talking about our zeros, our maximum and minimum, so on and so forth. In this case, it is a maximum because it doesn't go any higher than that point. The axis of symmetry here is going to be our x equals -1, because if we draw a line straight up through that -1 line mark on the x-axis, it is going to be where it belongs to split it in half. Our zeros here, you'll notice that if we look at our points of -3, 0, you'll notice that it actually has a 0 on it up here. You'll also see another 0 in the y at 1, and that is going to be another hint about what our x's are. So -3, 0, and open parentheses 1, 0. Whenever you have those zeros on there like that, it is going to be a hint, and those zeros have to be on the y. Like literally, this is a 0, that is a 0. If we put -3 in, we'll get a 0 out. If we put a 1 in, we'd get a 0 out. And we'll talk about how to solve for those as we start actually doing some math with these in a little bit. Last but not least, our y-intercept. Our y-intercept here, the point where it crosses the y-axis, happens when x equals 0. And on here, x equals 0 and y equals 3. It says so here. When x is 0, whatever y is your y-intercept. So we just put our equation in like that, and this thing is really being difficult. I apologize. 0 and 3 is going to be our y-intercepts. All right, so that is the basics on how you would graph this, as well as how you would begin solving for these values of the zeros, the y-intercepts, and all that stuff, given just an equation. If you would, I know that there's still one more on here. I'd like you to go ahead and solve that last one on your own. I will come by and check it. That way I can see if you're doing it correctly. Thank you.